America has had 46 presidents, and while the history books focus on their big speeches, landmark laws, and moments of crisis, I want to focus on something much more human. The quirks, the odd habits, the stories that make you stop and think, wait, this guy ran the country. So we're going from George Washington all the way to Joe Biden, sharing the weirdest thing about each president. And we're going to connect them in one strange journey through presidential history. Spoiler alert, it only gets weirder the further we go. We start with George Washington, the founding father, the general, the man whose face is on the $1 bill. People love to repeat the myth that he had wooden teeth. But the truth is more unsettling. His dentures were made from hippopotamus ivory, human teeth, some likely purchased from poor laborers, and bits of metal. Imagine chewing a steak with that setup. He hated wearing them, and they made his mouth bulge awkwardly in portraits. Washington was also paranoid about being buried alive, which, to be fair, was a genuine fear in the 1700s. In his will, he ordered that his body not be placed in the family vault for 3 days after death. Cautious to the end, from cautious to stubborn, John Adams, the nation's second president, was known for his fierce independence and his grudges. When he lost the 1800 election to his former friend Thomas Jefferson, Adams didn't just sulk, he refused to attend the inauguration entirely. Instead, he slipped out of Washington at 4 a.m., climbing into a stagecoach and leaving the Capitol behind. It was the presidential equivalent of ghosting someone after a breakup. Jefferson, meanwhile, was a man of contradictions, a statesman who also fancied himself a scientist and collector. During his presidency, the White House was practically a museum. Fossils, mastodon bones, antlers, and Native American artifacts filled the rooms. Guests could find themselves discussing policy while standing under a set of giant prehistoric tusks. He even had Lewis and Clark send back strange specimens from their expedition, turning the executive mansion into the world's most exclusive natural history display. Jefferson's close friend, James Madison, was next, a brilliant political thinker and the smallest president in U.S. history. At just 5'4" and around 100 pounds, Madison was nicknamed Little Jemmy. But what he lacked in height, he made up for in influence, having played a major role in writing the Constitution. Still, it must have been a sight to see him alongside the towering George Washington in earlier years, like a pocket-sized founding father next to a Revolutionary War action figure. And then there's James Monroe, who holds a patriotic but eerie record. He died on July 4th, 1831, exactly 5 years after both John Adams and Thomas Jefferson also died on the 4th of July. All three had been key figures in the Revolution. It's almost as if they were determined to leave the stage on America's birthday, adding one final chapter of symbolism to their lives. John Quincy Adams, Monroe's successor, had one of the most unusual presidential workout routines ever. Every morning, he'd walk down to the Potomac River, strip completely naked, and swim across. This was so well known that one journalist, eager for an interview, sat on his clothes one morning and refused to return them until Adams agreed to answer her questions. Washington, D.C., politics has always been a little strange. But that takes commitment. If Adams' mornings were odd, Andrew Jackson's pet ownership was even stranger. Jackson kept a parrot named Poll, who was apparently such a talented mimic of foul language that it had to be removed from Jackson's funeral for swearing too much. Jackson himself was known for his fiery temper, and it seems his parrot picked up more than just his voice. Jackson's successor, Martin Van Buren, holds the distinction of being the first president actually born a U.S. citizen. All previous presidents had been born before independence. But the really odd part, his first language wasn't English. Van Buren grew up speaking Dutch in his New York hometown, making him the only president for whom English was technically a second language. And then we have William Henry Harrison, who famously gave the longest inauguration speech in history, nearly 2 hours, in freezing rain, without a coat or hat. A month later, he was dead from pneumonia. Historians still debate if the speech caused it, but if nothing else, it's a cautionary tale. Dress appropriately for the weather, even if you're the president. His vice president, John Tyler, holds a fact that boggles the mind. He was born in 1790, but as of today, he still has living grandchildren. How? Well, Tyler fathered children into his 70s, and one of his sons also became a father very late in life. It's a reminder that presidential history isn't always as far away as it seems. Next up is James K. Polk, who ran the White House more like a strict boarding school. He banned dancing, alcohol, and playing cards during his presidency. Basically, he was the president of no fun allowed. Not exactly the vibe for a capital city that was already pretty quiet in the 1840s. Polk was followed by Zachary Taylor, whose death remains one of the stranger presidential mysteries. Officially, he died after eating a large quantity of cherries and drinking iced milk at a 4th of July celebration. That combination gave him severe stomach illness, and within days he was gone. Some conspiracy theorists have suggested poisoning, but the cherries and milk story has stuck. Millard Fillmore was next elected, often ranked as one of the least memorable presidents, still gets credit for one thing. He installed the first bathtub in the White House. Back then, indoor plumbing was still a novelty, and this was front-page news. The presidency, now with bubbles. Next was Franklin Pierce had one of the most unfortunate presidential scandals. He was arrested during his term for allegedly running over an old woman with his horse. The charges were dropped for lack of evidence, but the incident didn't help his already troubled reputation. James Buchanan, the only lifelong bachelor president, had a taste for grand gestures. At one point, he bought a herd of elephants as a diplomatic gift for the King of Siam. The king politely declined. The whole thing sounds like the setup for a political cartoon. Abraham Lincoln, before he was a war president or the great emancipator, was a licensed bartender. He co-owned a saloon in Springfield, Illinois, serving drinks and telling stories to locals. It's a far cry from the solemn image we see on the penny. Andrew Johnson, who followed Lincoln, had a surprising domestic skill. He could sew his own clothes. In fact, he often made and mended his own jackets while in office. It's not often you picture a president at a sewing table. Ulysses S. Grant, Civil War hero and two-term president, once got a speeding ticket on horseback. He was fined $20 for riding too fast through Washington streets. The 19th century had its own traffic laws, apparently. Rutherford B. Hayes was the first president to use a telephone. Installed in 1877, the White House phone had the number 1. If you called the White House back then, you literally just asked the operator for number 1. James Garfield had a brain for languages and a unique party trick. He could write Latin with one hand and Greek with the other at the same time. I struggle to text with one thumb, so this is wildly impressive. Chester A. Arthur was a sharp dresser, so sharp that he reportedly owned over 80 pairs of trousers. The man took "dress for the job you want" very seriously. Grover Cleveland is the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, making him both the 22nd and 24th president. So technically, he is counted twice in the list of presidents, a fact that still confuses schoolchildren. Benjamin Harrison, sandwiched between Cleveland's 2 terms, was the first to have electricity in the White House. But he was so afraid of being shocked that he refused to touch the light switches. McKinley always wore a red carnation in his lapel for luck. Moments before being assassinated, he handed the flower to a little girl in the crowd, a tragic final gesture. Teddy Roosevelt was famously tough. Once, during a speech, he was shot in the chest by an assassin. Instead of going to the hospital, he delivered the speech anyway, telling the crowd, "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose." Taft, Roosevelt's successor, is forever linked to the story of getting stuck in the White House bathtub. While the details are debated, it's true that a much larger tub was installed for him, one big enough to hold 4 men comfortably. During World War I, Woodrow Wilson had sheep graze the White House lawn to save on groundskeeping costs and raise money for the Red Cross by selling their wool. Harding, not known for his restraint, once lost the White House's fine china in a poker game. At least he didn't bet the building itself. Coolidge was famously quiet, but he had one bizarre indulgence. He liked to have his scalp massaged with petroleum jelly while eating breakfast in bed. Hoover and his wife spoke fluent Mandarin Chinese, and they used it to have private conversations in the White House when they didn't want staff to understand them. FDR was a passionate stamp collector, amassing over 25,000 stamps during his lifetime, a calming hobby during turbulent times. Truman's middle initial, S, doesn't stand for anything. It was a compromise between the names of his grandfathers, both of whose names began with S. Eisenhower installed a putting green on the White House lawn, making presidential downtime a matter of national security, at least for golf balls. JFK won a Pulitzer Prize for his book Profiles in Courage, the only president to do so. Not bad for a side project. LBJ was notorious for holding meetings from the bathroom, literally while using it, because he hated to waste time. Nixon could play the piano, violin, saxophone, clarinet, and accordion. It's a shame he never held a White House talent show. Before politics, Ford worked as a fashion model, even appearing on the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine in the 1940s. Carter once filed an official UFO sighting report claiming he saw a strange object in the sky in 1969. Reagan loved jelly beans so much that they became a symbol of his presidency, with a jar always on his desk. Bush despised broccoli so much, he banned it from Air Force One and the White House entirely. Clinton played the saxophone on national television during his campaign, cementing his image as the cool candidate. Bush once choked on a pretzel while watching football and briefly lost consciousness, proving snacks can be dangerous. Obama is a comic book fan, collecting Spider-Man and Conan the Barbarian issues since childhood. Trump was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, making him the only president to have both a political and wrestling legacy. And finally, Joe Biden. He's had multiple German shepherds in the White House, and one of them was briefly sent away for bad behavior after biting a staff member. Proof that even presidential pets can get into trouble. And there you have it, 46 presidents, 46 strange facts. From hippo ivory dentures to pet parrots that swear, the White House has seen it all. Which one surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and if you want more history with a twist, make sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious.